Experience work interactions in a different and refreshing light. This is the Leader in You podcast, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about. We bring the science of attachment and emotional connection with insight from the last 20 years to share how you can overcome conflict issues at work and build strong team relationships, as well as the connected culture.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Leader in You podcast. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Polina, and I co host this wonderful podcast with my amazing mom, Dr. Lola Gershfeld. Welcome, Mom.
Hi, Polina. It's so nice to be here. I'm sorry we're not next to each other like we did at the ATD conference.
Yeah, that was so nice. Well, we just got back from the ATD conference and we had such an exciting time there in Texas. Can't wait for the next ATD conference. But one of the things that came up was a really interesting discussion on something that we thought would be such a great topic to talk about in today's podcast. So we're going to get right to it. Hopefully, for those of you who are watching or listening, maybe you attended our ATD conference or you watched our videos from the conference or you listened to our podcast. If you did, make sure to comment down below. Let us know. We want to make sure that we are connecting with you, and we absolutely love and appreciate all of your, incredible, amazing commitment to understanding how to have better relationships in the workplace. So today we're going to talk about something really interesting. Dr. Lola calls it curveball experiment. So what happens typically in a conflict is, there's always two people involved at least, sometimes even more, and in every relationship, but we're specifically talking about the workplace. And oftentimes, what we hear from people that listen to us or want to use the process or start talking about their conflicts is that they really get stuck with the curveballs that occur during the conflict or during the conversation. So let's say, for example, you have a conflict or a situation and you pull out your EMC process or the form that we have, or your manual or your journal or your leadership, whatever forms that you have from us and the tools to work through the conflicts. And you start to go through communicating about your triggers and your needs and your raw spots. And one of the things that we hear is what blocks people from continuing that kind of conversation or to even start is like something called this curveball, where one person will be sharing their experience and the other person will interrupt the experience and have a really hard time with listening to the other person's side. That's one example. Another example of a curveball is someone who shuts down and is not like even willing to communicate or talk about what is happening in the situation. So that's another curveball. A third example would be like if at the very beginning, even after the conflict occurs, before the conversation is even had or even brought up, like, hey, we need to have a conversation about it, the person is not like, think that there's nothing wrong. And it's like, oh, I didn't even know there was a problem. So I don't know why we'd be talking about it. So all those instances that doesn't bring you to a conversation where two people can actually reconnect and rediscover what took place on an emotional level in those conversations, they get thrown a curveball. So we're going to talk about that today. And we're going to share some experiences. Dr. Lowe is going to share some experience that she's had with with some of the clients that she's worked with before. But let's start off with explaining and understanding why the curveballs. And I know that why can be sometimes a difficult question to answer, but I think it's really important to really get the picture of what happens in a conflict. Why do people feel like they throw these curveballs? They don't even realize what they're doing, but these curveballs occur and get both people stuck in the conflict.
I love your
Enlighten us,
introduction.
Dr. Lola.
I love
Enlighten
you.
us.
Yeah, I love your introduction because that's exactly what happens when people are hurt and disconnected, they are off balance. And it's
Yes.
difficult for them to listen to the other person's side or experience because they're off balance. They have all kinds of different emotions, and it's very difficult for them to feel empathic during that moment. right? So a manager or a third party who can help these two people to facilitate the conversation, their goal, and that is number one step for us in our process, is to create safety and alliance. So alliance, it means that we understand and we can really validate each person's side and each person's experience without invalidating the other person's experience.
One of the things that occurs that I see also is that if someone's sharing what is the struggle with them and the other person interrupts or starts like defending themselves or explaining, because I think that's so typical. It's like they really want to make sure that the other person doesn't make it seem like they're the bad guy in the situation or it's like their fault. And so, even in the process, we have to identify the things that the other person did that impacted that person in the conflict. But that curveball comes from, yes, you're off balance, but it's also like they're so used to being blamed and pointing fingers in society. So, the balance is bringing people back to understanding that it's not their fault.
Yes, yes, and that is very true. The curveball is their protection, is they want to make sure they're not the bad guy, they are not the only person who is causing this troublemaker. It's basically what they're saying is, wait a second, don't disconnect from me, don't turn away from me, because I'm also struggling for connection. I'm also struggling to make sure that I'm valued, I have a voice. So these curveballs, we have to recognize them as protection in that moment when they use them. And we have to hold to truth, like you talked about that at the conference on our panel, that we have to learn how to hold these spaces for people, validating one person and validating the other person. We don't have to agree with the content, but we definitely have to give them space and validation of their experience. So, one of the things that we want to do is we want to tune into this present emotion, right? As soon as person throws a curveball, we have to recognize what's going on for them so we can slow it down and say, what just happened? What is it that you feel in that moment when you try to defend yourself or you try to say something? Because when we are in the present moment, we can really feel that emotion. As we shared at the conference, we change emotion with emotion. So we can validate the person's emotion and we can recognize what's happening, help us to understand what's going on for you in this moment. The live emotion that is happening in the room is what the most powerful.
So, what would you suggest? What is like an action step people can take? Like, if they do feel like there is a moment or an instance where, we heard this also in the conference, like in the questions that were being asked, like, well, what if I have someone who doesn't want to participate in the conversation or says, like, yeah, they just don't talk at all. It's like talking to a wall. They're sharing their emotions, but there's like no response whatsoever. So, what would you suggest our listeners do?
Well, one of the things we talked about in our Navigating Difficult Conversations session is to recognize the cycle that is taking over the relationship, the process that the people are interacting with each other. So, who is a pursuer? Who is a withdrawer? That's number one.
What does that look like? Because I think that's where people get stuck too. They say like, okay, we're stuck. Like that person doesn't want to participate, or that person is saying this, or they're disconnected, or they're disengaged completely. So what does it look like to recognize, like an example?
By their behavior. So, for example, if we see that one person is shutting down and not responding, we recognize that they are using withdrawal strategies to protect themselves. They may be getting overwhelmed, they feel like not heard, they feel not good enough, they feel blamed somehow, they feel isolated, and they feel unappreciated. So they will withdraw, distance, avoid, shut down. And in that moment, we know that they are using withdrawal strategies. For pursuers, People who try to explain or lecture or criticize maybe come across as demanding or complaining, whining. Those people are pursuing. So both people are using these strategies to try to reconnect and repair the connection, but they don't know how to do it effectively, so they do it ineffectively. The most common cycle is pursue withdraw cycle. One is pursuing, come on, let's talk. Don't you understand? You hurt me, or the way you did it, it's really causing me this distress. The other person is shutting down. I don't want to talk about it. You always are so nagging and you attacking me. Nothing I do is good enough. So as you can see, one is attacking, the other is defending, and they are trying to get out of the stuck place, but they are doing it ineffectively. So this is a pursue withdraw cycle. So as a manager, when I'm working or as a facilitator, I'm working with these two people and I see that one person is withdrawing, the other person is pursuing, I'm giving them the message, both of them. Like for the pursuer, I would validate their experience and say, I know how difficult that is for you when you can't reach the other person. I know how difficult it is for you to work when you don't get the response. I hear you. That must be very, very difficult for you. You get into panic, you get into stressful situation, you feel stuck, you feel not heard. So the message I'm giving them is I see you, I get your pain, I'm right here, you matter, your voice matters.
So this is from a perspective of a manager or a boss or someone who's stepping in to help two people that are in a conflict. So let's say
Yes.
you do have a situation where you're a team leader, or maybe you could even be a colleague, and you're now dealing with a conflict with two people at work, and you're going to use the process to help support them reconnect and resolve what's going on. And so the first step in your role is to identify who's the withdrawer and who's the pursuer in the cycle, or if they're both withdrawers or that they're both pursuers, because that's going to give you um, the information you need to then decide what phrases and what tool to choose in order to deliver that tool to each of the individuals involved in the conflict. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, because you want to tune with them, right? You want to create an alliance with them so they see
Yeah.
that they are not alone. They you get them.
Okay, so in this instance, Dr. Lola is saying that, like, let's say you have one person that's a pursuer and the other person that's a withdrawer. If you have a pursuer in the cycle, which is the most common cycle, is the pursuer withdrawer cycle, but there is also the pursuer pursuer cycle and the withdrawer withdrawer cycle. So if you see the one person that is pursuing or withdrawing, then you say specific things to that person.
Yes.
So to just reiterate, for the pursuer,
You say, I see you, I get you, you matter, your voice matters, you're not alone. I see how difficult that is for you when you can't reach that person.
and remember, for those of you who are listening or watching, you can find all these phrases in Dr. Lola's materials, her training, the workbook, the journal, the form. You can find them also in the Connected Culture book, which is right behind her on the screen if you're watching our channel. You can also find it in the training, the course. So, okay, we say those phrases to the pursuer.
Right. For the withdrawer, the worst fear for the withdrawer is that no matter what I do, it's never good enough. For the withdrawer, we want to give them message is you're doing it right. It's not your fault. You're not failing. Nobody's a bad guy. It's a negative cycle. But all of these messages help them to be able to re-engage into the conversation.
So this is interesting because I was just thinking about like, have you heard of the Love Languages book?
Yes, love
Yeah.
languages. Uh-huh.
And one of the love language, and I think it's really interesting, it focuses on just like an intimate relationship, right, that you would have. And I don't actually agree with the book or the way that the book was written at all, because I feel like everyone needs all of the love languages. There's not one more significant than the other. But one of the love languages is reassurance. And I think that it's important to understand that in a situation, in a conflict, a lot of times people need, even though they say they may not need it, because I know that I can tell when people feel like asking for what they need in a reassurance way could be a sign of weakness. So using these phrases without necessarily understanding exactly what the person needs, but knowing how these phrases help a pursuer withdraw in the cycle can really create that safety. So it's like you're validating and reassuring them in that moment for the deepest fears that they experience. And the reason why we already know the fears is because we have common fears. The pursuer has very common fears with other pursuers, and withdrawers have very common fears with other withdrawers. So it is typically around very similar fears that the people get into conflict over in the workplace.
Right. And that's what
So,
attachment teaches us. Attachment
yeah.
really helps us to understand how to recognize withdrawn pursuer behaviors and the fears behind those protective behaviors so we can be on target. And we know how to create that alliance for them and emotional safety so they can re-engage and repair the connection. And what I want to say is the most important thing that we are doing also through the process is this creating these bonding moments because we want people to turn to each other and we want them to share vulnerability because if people don't share their vulnerability they will never be reconnected. It's like
Mhm.
from cognitive to the heart level you go. You can
Yeah.
understand but you really have to feel what's going on in that disconnection.
So tell us about you were saying that you wanted to share an example with a team that you worked with.
Yes, I think we should share it next time because it's a little long example and I know we have a short amount of time.
Okay, we'll leave everyone on edge.
Yes, yes. So let's do that next time. But I really do want to stress out that the stages and steps in our EMC process, in fact, we are talking about that specifically in Navigating Difficult Conversations book, really outlines the steps and how to lead people through these reconnection conversations so people can feel safe and they can feel relieved and they'll feel reconnected. And every
Yeah.
time, I mean, you know from your experience, every time we do these conversations, you feel so much more relief at the end.
Yeah, and I think even at the ATD conference, we were talking about navigating difficult conversations. One of the things that I shared is that, I don't think that people realize the heaviness that comes with holding on to our emotional experiences in conflicts, how heavy it is. They don't realize when we hold on to the emotional experiences that we have when we have a conflict, it is like carrying a bag of bricks. And when we carry that bag of bricks, and like people talk about like having baggage, and this is the biggest thing I think is really to understand. And for people who are withdrawers, so if you're listening or you are watching and you are a withdrawer, it's important to understand that it's very, very difficult to hold on to your emotional experience and keep it to yourself. It is like a heavy weight. Same with pursuers, but I do have to say that it is difficult to also be able to communicate your emotional experience when you have a conflict. But it is more damaging and painful to hold it in because you can put the weight down when you express yourself on an emotional level using this specific process. That's when it feels relieving. That is why we experience that relief. When we can express ourselves emotionally, it's like taking a weight out of that bag and putting the weight down onto the floor because it's no longer something we have to carry around with us. And when we carry that heavy weight, imagine if you do carry that big bag with tons of bricks in it for a very long period of time, your physical body starts to feel the effects of that weight as well. So I love that we can bring light to the curveballs because it is very normal and it is a way that people protect themselves. And also, there is a way out. There is hope because we have this formulated process that is very, very effective. And you don't have to guess and try to make sense of your feelings and your experience in an emotional conflict. You can literally follow the steps in order to express yourself in an effective way.
Amen. That's what I can say. It is
I
it is
left you speechless.
it is consistent, it is efficient, it is effective, and it gets to the heart of the matter. And I think that's what I love about this.
Yeah. I want to add one more thing before we close today. I do want to say that we want to get to the heart of the matter so that your heart could be open and free in order to live your best life, right? The whole point is that learning this process is going to get you to the life that you actually want, the opportunity for you to build your best life and have those experiences where you feel really connected and not alone in this world, because that actually creates that environment where we could thrive and we can be our best selves. So, thank you very much for listening and thank you for watching. This is the Leader in You podcast. My name is Polina and I'm here with Dr. Lola Gershfeld. And remember, we're here every week. Go to our website, emcleaders.com, to find out more information about our course, the masterclass, and make sure to connect with us. Lola at emcleaders.com or Polina at emcleaders.com. Tell us how much you love us, because we know you do. And we're here to help you live a better quality life and to have a better experience in the workplace. Thank you for watching, and we'll
Thank
see you
you.
next week.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's a joy to share these podcasts with you. Be sure to check out our previous podcasts and subscribe to join us at our next podcast of The Leader in You, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about. Until then, be well and be focused on your relationships. We'll see you soon.